Welcome to this explainer. You have probably noticed the massive demographic reshuffling happening across the US right now, right? Well, today we are going way beyond just the raw numbers. We're diving deep into the really intense cultural and political commentary surrounding exactly why folks are packing up, and the friction that sparks when they finally arrive. We are going to unpack the arguments, the anxieties, and the paradoxes highlighted by various commentators about this whole blue to red state exodus. To kick things off, let's look at this quote. Take a self-described liberal Democrat who recently made the move to Wyoming. She described her leap of faith to escape our blue state of Washington and actually called the move the best blessing of her life. What's super compelling here is how she talks about leaving a toxic bubble. Because you often don't realize how abnormal your environment is until you physically step outside of it and get a total reset. It's a really powerful personal anecdote that sets the stage for the broader trend we're exploring today.
So, to make sense of all this, we'll break the commentary down into four main themes. First, the blue to red exodus. Second, culture shock and adaptation. Third, the voting habit debate. And fourth, accusations of political hypocrisy.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the blue to red exodus.
The sources we're looking at highlight a massive, high-volume movement of people leaving predominantly blue states. We're talking about places like Illinois, Oregon, Washington, California, Massachusetts, and New York. And where are they heading? Mostly red states like Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Texas. This definitely isn't just a tiny trickle. It's a major demographic and economic shift happening right across the country.
But why leave in the first place? Well, according to the commentary, for many, the move is all about finding peace, quiet, and escaping an environment they'd started to view as genuinely toxic. It's often pitched as a return to this neighborly, hardworking lifestyle. One example given was a small Wyoming town where businesses actually close on Sundays just so people can do yard work, hang out with their families, and go to church.
Moving on to Section 2, Culture Shock and Adaptation. Now, as our sources point out, simply crossing state lines doesn't automatically guarantee you a cultural fit. The commentators really emphasize that not all red states are created equal. If you are moving for a political or cultural reset, you absolutely have to know what you're buying into. Because the distinct cultures of, say, Florida or Texas are totally different from that quiet, hardworking pace of life in Wyoming. Assuming every single conservative state offers the exact same lifestyle is apparently a huge pitfall for newcomers.
And this introduces a really interesting complication, the concept of blue cities within red economies. Think of major urban centers like Houston, Dallas, and Austin. They lean liberal, but they exist within the broader conservative economy and culture of Texas. The commentary points out this massive irony, where many migrants, specifically naming Californians who move to Texas, end up retreating right back to California. Basically, they move to these cities expecting one kind of environment, but fundamentally fail to understand or adapt to the overarching culture of the state they just bought a house in.
Which brings us to Section 3, the voting habit debate. All this cultural friction leads directly to a massive core anxiety expressed by the commentators, and it boils down to this question right here. Do you still bring your voting habits with you? When someone moves to a new culture, do they adapt their mindset to match the new surroundings, or do they just import their old voting patterns? There's this deep concern among locals who have cultivated a specific culture that they just don't want their new neighbors turning their home into a mirror image of Seattle or Portland.
And that brings us right back to the push factors driving this exodus in the first place. The commentators argue that migrants are specifically running away from severe systemic issues. We are talking high taxes, failing public schools, rising crime, and poor public transportation. The sources explicitly mention people fleeing the taxes and crime of places like Chicago or trying to escape cities where they feel the local government is literally just running things into the ground. One source actually summarizes this economic anxiety with a pretty vivid phrase, saying socialism piggybacks and rides the coattails of capitalism. The argument they're making here is that high-tax progressive policies can only exist by overly taxing the success generated by a free market capitalist environment. From this perspective, people are fleeing because they feel their tax dollars just aren't working for them anymore, and they are tired of seeing their success drained to fund agendas they completely disagree with. All right, let's get into Section 4, Accusations of Political Hypocrisy.
You can really feel the intensity ramp up here. One highly frustrated commentator directly questions the logic of liberal voters, point-blank asking, is it mental illness? They are just utterly baffled by the idea of voting for politicians who, in their view, ruin a state so badly that you can't afford a decent way of life, only to flee to a red state and immediately vote for those exact same policies all over again. They're genuinely asking how it makes any logical sense to recreate the exact environment you just desperately escaped.
To really hammer home this alleged hypocrisy, another speaker challenges California migrants directly with a very specific number. They ask, hey, if you're going to vote blue no matter what, why not just stay in California? Why not stay and enjoy that $30 an hour minimum wage to flip burgers that you voted for and celebrated? The commentator is basically demanding that migrants put their emotions aside and answer why they're leaving in such massive volumes if they actually support the policies of their home states.
Ultimately, the sources build a collective case against these migrants based on 4 core accusations. Number 1, they're fleeing states that they themselves ran to ruin. Number 2, they're leaving the mess for everyone else to deal with. Number 3, they are arriving in red states and messing up the successful environments the locals have built. And number 4, they're hypocritically voting against their own best interests simply out of stubborn habit.
The commentary finally culminates with the speaker asserting that people just continue voting for destructive policies out of blind expectation. They use this highly charged phrase talking about staying on the Democratic plantation, arguing that people just do what's expected of them politically, even when they hate the resulting high taxes and bad policies. The speaker even throws in mentions of Trump derangement syndrome as a driving factor for this behavior. As you can see, it is a stark, unfiltered look at the deep political divides and resentment surrounding this whole migration wave.
So we'll wrap up this explainer by leaving you to ponder the central, provocative contradiction these commentators are highlighting. It's a fundamental question of human behavior and consequence. If people uproot their entire lives and move across the country to escape an environment they deem unlivable, why might they risk transforming their new home into the exact one they just fled?